Everything old is new again. America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, Mark, like a dog for me.
Where's the goodies? Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
There's the windup. Here's the pitch. It's a slow curve low, and the Babe swings. It's a long one going out toward right center. Stengler's backing up against the wall. He can't get it. It's in there. Another home run for the Bambino. So the Babe hits his second homer of the day.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. This is our second show on baseball and baseball announcers and time traveling back through, I guess we'd say, YouTube, the ability that we have to listen to shows or broadcasts of old radio shows, of course, but old broadcasts of baseball shows from the 1920s forward. That was from 1927, right in the middle of Babe Ruth's storied career. And I'm here with our own Babe Ruth himself, David Cohen.
Speaking of storied careers, yes, thanks, Doug. Great to be here. We had a great time in the first baseball show, so looking forward to this one, too.
We did. It was just a freewheeling because we were kind of looking at baseball now, and we're not complaining about it, whatever, but it's stuck in mud right now, so to speak, and we want to look back and see what was it like for people to enjoy baseball when it was the national pastime, one of the only things you could listen to? We have so much now that distracts us, and for good and bad, that it's it's not as popular as it was. And what was it like before? And let's celebrate these announcers. I think it's very underrated that we don't really celebrate the people that built this tremendous house of it's not, I couldn't say house of cards. It's a house made of like steel and concrete, so to speak, baseball itself. But without the announcers, where would we be? David Cohen, yes or no?
We wouldn't be anywhere. I mean, I'm still telling people about that one clip you played from the first show where the guy doing the broadcast of the baseball game doubled as the public address guy for the stadium. It was hilarious.
Ty Tyson. It was amazing. And we've advanced a little bit since then in our show. We're going to talk about mostly from the 40s and 50s and 60s today. We're going to have to do another show. And we're just kind of examining. We can't really say who's the best announcer, but we're going to hit some highlights of announcers you know, announcers you don't know. But what, I don't know, you tell me, is it of any interest to you to listen to maybe for a half hour the 1927 Yankees play, another team, and hear how it was announced? Before, these guys were mythical figures. They were just men playing baseball then. You know what I'm saying?
I'm more interested in the guys actually doing the broadcasting than the baseball players, just to listen to their style of describing what's happening over the radio and, painting a mental picture for you of what's going on, because they all had a certain style and phrases they use, which some are antiquated and not generally acceptable in today's vernacular, but nonetheless really, really interesting to listen to.
Yeah, and very different from now. Now it's very for most of them, very bland. John Sterling, our local announcer for the Yankees, isn't bland, but there are many that are bland, and lots of people are not fans of Sterling because he's not bland. So, you take a chance when you try to do things. Back then, they were building the foundation, and I loved it. Let's just listen, because that comment leads us into a clip I have here from 1945. Let's listen to the wordplay here of this game.
And our friend, Bill Corum, looking very sharp today, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. And we're right back where we started in Detroit last week.
I apologize. I want to let you know that was from the 1945 World Series Game 7, Cubs versus the Tigers. This is right before the game starts. This is your color setup.
And our friend, Bill Corum, looking very sharp today, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. And we're right back where we started in Detroit last Wednesday as far as this series goes. Except, of course, that whatever may happen today, saving the remote possibility of a tie game called Because of Darkness, this is payday. Al Neuhauser for the Battening Bengals and Hank Baroy for the Clawing Little Bears. And it isn't as if practically everything hasn't already happened. we've had about everything except a triple play, a balk, and a wedding at home plate.
A wedding at home plate and announcing the teams by their nicknames. And I don't know. You see the style?
In case the game was called because of darkness.
Like, you know, this is payday, you know, like.
This is payday.
Because back in the day, unlike now, the World Series, you would win. I mean, you hear this all the time about the Yankees and why they were so hungry all the time. They were paid a decent salary, let's say, a workman's salary during the season. But their extra money and their, you know, what would you say, their bonus and their livelihood, their, you know, to become a quote, rich person, was depended upon that 2 or 3 or 4, whatever thousand that they would win if they won the World Series.
Yeah, I guess there was financial incentive back then.
Absolutely.
To make it to the postseason.
So that was payday for them. So that's that.
Payday.
You know, if that doesn't give you, like, it kind of should ring a bell, or at least it reminds you that, you know what, baseball players weren't always paid millions and millions and millions.
Did you want a response from me on that? That is correct. They were not.
You are correct, sir.
Correct, sir.
How about a guy that goes back? Everyone has heard of this gentleman, I think, across the country, Red Barber. Maybe not. He was the foundation. He was the mentor to Vin Scully, who everyone says is the best of all time, whatever. I would argue that, but he's certainly top 3, I would say. But Red Barber is there. Listen to, he announced the Brooklyn Dodgers, then he left the Brooklyn Dodgers at some point and went over to the hated Yankees for a while. I don't know if you remember that, David Cohen, the 60s.
I don't remember that. It was before we were born.
I know, but it's a history of everything, and everything old is new again. You have to realize we base the foundation of today's baseball announcers.
I mean, I know that fact, but I don't remember it.
Well, here we go. This will bring it back some memories. Here we go.
That was an inside curve that Mueller fell away from and hit it like a line drive right out into lower section 30 in the left field stands. So I guess that one, if you ask Dan what happened, say, well, that one got away from me. An inside curve. In other words, you don't do that. You pitch that curve outside, but that one got inside, and Mueller, boy, that was like money from home when you're broke.
It was like a guy hit a home run, and he's explaining, you know, like, that's like, you just pitched the wrong pitch to me. That's money from home when you're broke. I'm hitting a home run on that every time. So he's teaching you a little bit about the game, but he's also using that creative wordplay, which you may or may not like. But also, did you notice there's no rush? You know, you heard the crowd in between. I have other clips that even do this more dramatically, but you heard the audience, you know, the people in the stands. And, you know, he was allowing the game to come to you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You know, he wasn't rushing and didn't have to fill every second with
But also
word.
the game was faster. They moved at a faster pace,
No
too.
doubt.
So they didn't have the kind of time to fill that announcers have to deal with today.
Correct. But they didn't worry about it, you know. And he was in the booth alone. He did the first 3 innings and the last 3, and there's another guy that did the middle 3. I sat in the pool the other day and listened to Dodgers 1953 against the Pittsburgh Pirates with Ralph Kiner. And I listened to the whole game. And really? I literally was placed back.
They're actually playing baseball now. You can watch it live.
I don't like it now. I don't like it now. I've come to that conclusion. And because I'm being spoiled by listening. That whole game was 2 hours and 15 minutes. It was exciting. It was it was exciting. Things are happening like one after the next. I didn't have to wait and hear all this stuff in between. It was grand.
Did
really
you know
good.
the outcome of the game?
No.
Or were you just listening?
It was just a regular season game,
playing?
so I had no idea.
So it was like you were listening to it, quote unquote, live, right?
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
And he's describing Ebbets Field and the dimensions, and you can hear the guys calling for, you know, beer here and stuff like that. It was just, and he did the commercials himself. And
really?
The new cereal was Cocoa Crisp or something like that. Some crispy, sugary cereal was the sponsor. And if you hit a home run, you would get a case of this.
A case of Cocoa Crisp. Hey, Mom.
Carl Furillo just won a case of Cocoa Crisp for hitting that grand slam home run. You know, it's funny.
Make it part of a nutritional breakfast for your kids, Mom.
Yeah, well, they were announcing, they're saying you don't need to add sugar because it's got the sugar on it.
Oh,
that was the big thing.
It's all sugar.
Skip that step because back then you'd have cornflakes and you'd load it with sugar, right? You would take the sugar, anyway.
Frosted Flakes.
So let's listen to a little bit more Red Barber. Listen to the audience, the crowd. Like this is broadcast.
Center fielder and left-hand hitter Tommy Saffel. Brooklyn 3, Pittsburgh 2. Ralph Kiner waiting on deck. So you know that batter doesn't want to tangle with him if he can help it. Taking dead aim on Saffel right here.
is that not different than what you hear today? Just like it's subtle, but isn't that different?
Yeah, part of it was that affectation that announcers back in that day spoke with. It was very, it's hard to describe, and it doesn't exist anymore. Right. But it was a way of speaking that was very, not announcer so much, because it sounded like he was talking to you. So it was very personal, but it was very stylized, and it kind of made it, I think to me, it makes it sound like there's something important going on, and, you're just not listening to a play-by-play of people walking down some street somewhere. Although this guy would make that interesting too.
Exactly. But you notice he's always got a little something to say about, right. Kiner, and then he's on deck. So he doesn't just say. He doesn't want to face Kiner. He wants to come right at this guy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we'll be back right after this. No one wants to face these commercials, but we have to. We'll be back right after this, and everything old is new again. Examine more baseball from the past.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Left-hander Vic works up, and left-hander Don Little ready to go. Here's the pitch to Wirtz. Here's a long drive to deep center field. Mays back to the wall. Makes an incredible catch. Turns and fires it in. What a catch by Willie Mays.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. We're talking all things baseball of the past here with David Cohen, our own, our own anchor himself. David, how are you?
I could be the color guy. You'll be the play-by-play. I'll provide the color commentary.
That works. I'll take it. That was Willie Mays, 1954, that catch.
So that was Willie Mays, 1950. Oh, I was doing the color. But no, go ahead.
Well, I'll just announce it. That was Willie Mays' catch, 1954 for World Series by Russ Hodges, a stalwart announcer for the Giants for years and years and years. David Cohen.
That's right, Doug. He was an announcer for the Giants for years and years, and that was quite a catch by Mr. Mays in the outfield.
That's the one that you see, and he turns and whips it home and keeps the man on first base, I believe it was.
That's not the one where he makes the catch over his head.
Yes.
Back, makes a one-handed catch against the bullpen. Oh, that's a different catch. Never mind. But I remember the basket catch by Willie Mays, and the great thing about that was not just the catch, but he turned and threw it so that the runner couldn't advance, which was amazing.
Yes, and the announcing of that and the broadcasting of that and other highlights are just something that our grandparents, I'm sure, would revere, and we're just kind of looking at and seeing some of these announcers and kind of tipping our hat to these announcers, like Ernie Harwell. You remember him at all? He was in the Tigers for the longest time, but he started out his career with, I believe he replaced Red Barber, for the Dodgers when Red Barber went on to the Yankees. And then he was with the Tigers from like 1960 to 2002. And he's one of my favorites. I never got really to hear him that much. But in these days of the pandemic, as I've been saying, I've been going back and listening to old shows and old games. And here is Ernie Harwell calling. Remember this guy, Milt Wilcox, 1983, almost pitched a perfect game.
Well, the big moment has arrived here. Wilcox, 3 outs away from perfection. He has set down the White Sox. The first 24 batters have gone down in a row. And what a performance Wilcox has put on. 26 batters in a row have gone down before the slants of Wilcox. The crowd on its feet. The pitch. He swings. Base hit. Center field. Hairston spoils the bid. A grimace by Wilcox on the mound. Hairston banged the ball through the middle for a single.
Now, first of all, did you hear the boos in that crowd at the end?
Yeah.
That game was on the road. Milt Wilcox was a Detroit Tiger. They were playing the Chicago White Sox.
Everybody wants to see a no-hitter.
I was going to say, that's a White Sox crowd booing their own team.
But, Doug, do you think he actually saw Wilcox grimace? Or do you think he just kind of threw that in there, assuming he was probably grimacing?
That's what I love. I don't think he saw him grimace. I love the wordplay there. And if you heard, there was Joe Garagiola in there as well. Did you hear? Oh, no. He wasn't in there. He's in the next
That's why we didn't hear him.
Correct. But Ernie Harwell's he's got a style all his own, and they're in that same mode as Red Barber, just them alone and them just straight doing the game and using their own adjectives that are, making this come alive. The word picture, as Vince Scully says, really came alive with them. Let's listen to Ernie Harwell later on, actually earlier, 1963, with Joe Garagiola. Maybe you remember him.
Sandy's got that strikeout pitch working.
He's been using a slow curveball, looks like, to start his strike streak, and then comes in with that good fastball. I tell you, Ernie, you could break in a new glove in 4 innings the way he's popping it.
Wouldn't take long, would it?
Breaking a new glove. I mean, you don't hear stuff like that. I know it's a little thing, but these are just little nuances that you don't hear today, right?
Yeah, well, not as often, because, there was no TV for most of the period that we're talking about, or at least a lot of those games were not televised, and people relied on the radio. So anything you can do to make it come alive, I think, was the key back then.
Right, and it's so relaxed. That's the 1963 World Series, believe it or not, Game 1, Yankees-Dodgers, and they're talking about Ernie. Why do I keep saying Ernie? Sandy Koufax. I'm thinking of Entertainment World, and he just really, I'm thinking he just again, it's interesting to hear them in the middle of their career. They're not these icons yet, and they're just being talked about, and how how people of the day admired them, if that makes sense. And I enjoyed. How do I do this? Back in the day, let's say in the 70s. We would watch baseball on Saturdays of a national game. It was Tony Kubek, it was Curt Gowdy, and Joe Garagiola, right? That was for us. That was our era. That was the premier team of broadcasters. Right. Did you like them or you didn't like them? What's your memory of them?
You didn't have a choice back then because there were no cable networks. You just saw it on one of the three major networks at the time, and NBC had it on a weekly basis. You didn't have a choice, but I remember I liked listening to them because it was a different perspective from listening to your own guys call the game for your own team. And, a lot of times you're listening to local announcers are a bit of a homers, they kind of, maybe paint your team in a better picture than the opposing team. But the national guys really seem to describe things on a even basis. So I like that perspective about it from what I recall.
And I think they did a pretty good idea, they did a pretty good job with it, because they had the idea that they wanted to make sure that they presented right down the middle, the truth, honesty about these players and all that. Let's hear a little bit of interesting of 72 now, jump a little bit to Tony Kubek and Curt Gowdy.
Who, by the way, was a former Yankee.
Exactly. Second baseman. Shortstop. And took over after Rizzuto and won many championships. Was on that
pretty fair. I don't think he kind of... You couldn't tell, anyway, if he was leaning towards the Yankees or not, who were, terrible in those days.
Yeah, they were. That was the thing. The New York teams in those days were terrible. So we heard these guys announce other teams than ours. The Yankees and the Mets weren't on Game of the Week all that often, that's for sure. His 72 A's against Boston Red Sox. Luis Tiant against Reggie Jackson, announced by Tony Kubek, Curt Gowdy. See if you hear anything interesting.
It appears to be throwing a little bit of a screwball, Curt. Taking his speed off fastball or sinker, and it's breaking away from the left-handed hitters a little. And the batter is Reggie Jackson. Out on the corner, 3 pitches. Disposing of Reggie Jackson. 1 run. 2 hits, no errors, 1 left. It's on halfway, and Jackson may be out of the ball game.
Yeah, Jackson struck out and got thrown out of the game. He didn't like the call by the umpire right towards the...
it was a called strike. Yeah.
As they would go into the commercial break. But I remember them, and Curt Gowdy, I believe, was a Boston Red Sox announcer at the time. And at the time, Garagiola had just gone national, but he was with the Yankees in the 60s as an announcer. So we sort of were familiar with them. It was interesting to hear the two rivals, if you will, announced together. Yankees, Boston. You never heard that at all. You never felt that. And they were middle of the road. And I remember Garagiola always talking about, the pitches coming in. Will the batter expect the pitcher to throw this ball or that ball? And I do remember also Tony Kubek, very good analysis about the game, nothing beyond the game.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that was the first time they introduced 3 people in the booth. at the same time, because you had, the main play-by-play guy was Curt Gowdy, and Tony Kubek was the former ball player who, Garagiola was as well. But Kubek, I think all three of them shared play-by-play, but you also had two former baseball players, who were providing sort of insight into how the game was played and what to look for. So I'm just wondering if that's the first time there are ever three men in the booth. You were playing clips, a little while ago where it was just one guy sitting there in the radio booth. So it's not like viewers had anything to look at. So I think the job was probably a little bit easier for these three guys.
I think so, because when you were Red Barber or Ernie Harwell or whoever in the 40s, 50s, and 30s and 20s, you were alone in that booth. If you had a color person, they would announce the color. It was interesting. You hear the games from the 20s, 30s, and even 40s. It changed a little bit in the 40s, but you would hear the color announcer, and then at the end of the inning or at the end of the game, you would hear a summary, mostly at the end of the inning, of what went on from someone else. The color person, in other words, did the color in between innings only.
But isn't it interesting that now it's so specialized, right? You only hear one play-by-play guy, no matter how many people are in the booth. Whereas in the old days, they used to rotate. You were maybe the ex-ball player providing the color, but you did your 3 or 4.5 or whatever it is play-by-play innings every game.
Absolutely. I remember Bob Murphy, Lindsey Nelson, Ralph Kiner for the Mets. The three of them, they would do TV and radio. They would do 3 innings, and then go for the TV, let's say, and then go to 3 innings radio. And then Kiner would announce, as you say, part of those 3 innings, or one set of 3 innings, he would announce the actual, play-by-play, and then he'd be the color guy later on in another section of 3 innings.
Same thing with the Yankees. They had 3 also, 2 former ball players and 1, straight-on announcer, but they all took turns, 3 innings each, doing the play-by-play. That doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I never thought of that. I guess it's a lot easier for an ex-ball player to just give the color and move on, I guess.
And I think I'm doing a pretty good job of providing the color commentary on this show.
How about that? I wish there was a commercial break right now. It would be a perfect opportunity to go out right on that statement. But we have 30 more seconds.
Let's just insert one. Who cares?
A nice long, what do they call it? Interstitial. Right
interstitial.
There. Remember Kevin Burns announced that? I still don't know what that is. What is an interstitial?
Well, look at it as like a brief intermission where someone's performing something just for a few seconds.
Right. So that's what we're doing. We're just waiting for the commercial to come upon us. Not too well. We'll be back right after this. Everything Old is New Again. Continue talking, looking at baseball from days gone by, and what was it like for us to listen to baseball then, and what's it like now compared to it. Mickey Mantle.
I love Mickey.
Mickey who?
You know who, the fellow with the celebrated swing. Oh, I love Mickey.
Mickey who?
You know who, the one who drives me batty, every fellow with the celebrated swing.
Now, back to America's entertainment pop culture talk show. Everything old is new again, with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
I was warmer at the Super Bowl. They had a soup there that day. Line drive base hit. There's Salati on his way to third. No throw.
This is taking me back to my childhood. Keep going.
But anyway, they make it. I didn't know whether it was a gumbo or whether it was a chowder or something, but was that good? That was good.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. Can anyone tell who that was?
David Sounds like Billy Crystal.
Billy Crystal in the booth, the Yankee booth in the 90s, looking back at a stalwart announcer in New York, Phil Rizzuto, and imitating him, because Phil, let's go back, every provincial announcer, every local announcer, if they're really good, have their nuances that you can imitate and know the way they're broadcasting. Harry Callis or Harry Carey always seemed to be a little bit drunk, if you will. I don't know if he was, but he always had that little swagger. And all of the different announcers had a little something. Rizzuto had, of course, Holy Cow. But besides that, he would tell the stories of cannolis or of food or, of different events that happened in his life while the game was going on. And he did it exactly as Billy Crystal announced right there. I mean, it was a great imitation, no?
It was okay. I always thought I could do a little better.
Let's hear it.
The thing about Rizzuto is he was incredibly superstitious. So he would start talking about Italian food, let's say, something that Cora, his wife, made for him the other night. And a Yankee player would get a hit. Well, he couldn't stop talking because he was like, every time, holy cow, every time I mention calzone, another Yankee gets on base. And that's how he would operate. And a lot of times he would leave games early. That was the big shtick he had. He'd leave games early, and he would drive to New Jersey across the George Washington Bridge. But he'd have the game on the radio. And if he heard the Yankees were coming back, because usually he'd leave if there was like a blowout or the game was, sort of over. But if he heard there was a comeback, he would literally turn around in New Jersey, drive back over the bridge, back into the stadium, and come back into the booth. It was just, he was a one of a kind.
He was a character. And I don't mean to be, just talk about New York, but that's where we grew up. But I'm sure every baseball fan listening, when they grew up, had someone that was like that sort of became a family member, that sort of filled the time with stories, right? I mean, because there's a lot of time in baseball, especially now, to tell stories and get to know these announcers. And I'm not putting the ones down now. There's some great ones now, but it seems like there was an era of personality, right? In like, let's call it late 50s to like the 80s. There was just this thing where you would listen to the game, but he was listening with a buddy, so to speak, that's on the radio or on the television. It was listening with someone you knew, someone that taught you how to play the game or understand the game, but also someone that, like Rizzuto, shared with you these stories of their life. It was just funny. Now, they also announced amazing things that happened that you will sometimes not remember. If you, and I wasn't there, but if you were around in 61 when Roger Maris hit the 61st home run, you may or may not remember this.
Here's the windup. Fastball hit deep to right. This could be it. Way back there. Holy cow. 61 for Maris. Another standing ovation for Roger Maris. One of the greatest sights I've ever seen here at Yankee Stadium. To come out and take another bow. He does.
There we go. So there's little Phil Rizzuto as an excited Phil announcing a game, a little younger in his career, earlier point in his career, right?
Yeah, 61.
Yes,
he broadcast well into the 1980s.
Yeah, he did a great job, and of course, after a Hall of Fame career. And I think he may have, and I know he was in the booth with Red Barber at the time, but he was also in the booth with Mel Allen, which is another very famous Yankee announcer. And Mel Allen was around for the DiMaggio years, and I think, and he also announced with Red Barber at that time. And I think that if you're a fan or were a fan back then, that was your guy. Like, all these people become, just like the players, the announcers were like, just say an extra player. They were an extra feature. You're listening to the game. What do you listen to? I'm listening to Rizzuto. Like, sometimes you'd say that instead of saying I'm listening to the Yankees, right?
Yeah, they became your connection to the team.
Right.
Like you were saying, you equated them with your team. If you're watching the Yankees or the Cardinals, you're listening to fill in the blank. That's what your connection was to the team.
Right. And so let's hear a little bit of Mel Allen, just same time frame, the home run before the one we just heard, Roger Maris' 60th home run in 61.
There it is. There it is. If it stays fair, there it is, number 60. That. There's standing ovation. A standing ovation for Roger Maris, who got number 60.
So he had How About That. Rizzuto had Holy Cow. Catchphrases, was that important? Can you think of any catchphrases anybody now?
Full of guys are full of catchphrases now. It's like your signature, and some of them are a bit absurd, but I think Holy Cow was also Harry Carey's catchphrase, too. And I don't know who came up with it first, but him or Rizzuto. But they both used it. But to answer your question, yeah, that definitely is a legacy that lives on today, I think a bit too much.
The catchphrase.
The catchphrase.
Yeah, I think Sterling, in our world, he makes a different name or catchphrase for each player on the Yankees once they hit a home run, and it's a little caricature-ish now. It's a little too much.
Well, the problem with doing that, and what's different today than yesterday, was that it's almost like with today's announcers, it's almost more about them than it is about what's going on in the field. And I think the how about that's and the holy cows were just something that these announcers had said once, and it sort of caught on. But it was never about them personally. It was more about the game, where, as I think today, to sort of, I don't know, self-promote, I guess.
Right.
They come up with, like in John Sterling's case, way too many catchphrases. It just takes away from the game.
It does, and he was so much better, in my view, when that was natural. He did some of those naturally in the 90s.
He actually do play-by-play. Now he doesn't anymore. Now he just launches into whatever catchphrases, and you have no idea what's actually happening on the field.
And half the time, he's an older gentleman, so maybe that's part of it, but half the time when he's announcing, or if he's announcing, he's telling you there's a home run being hit, and then it gets caught. Many times. Right. He's just missing the action, so to speak. But okay, this is what happens over time. We can pick on people, that's for sure. But let's look back at some of and they deserve it. But let's look back at Chris Chambliss, 1976, Rizzuto, because I know Rizzuto is a big, what would you say? You're a big fan of Rizzuto, and maybe this will spur you on to do a little more imitation. Let's see what happens.
Finish, as dramatic a finish as you'd ever want to see. And holy cow, Chambliss hits one over the fence. He is being mobbed by the fans, and this field will never be the same, but the Yankees have won it in the bottom of the ninth, 7-6. And on the scoreboard they're flashing, we're number one. And I want to tell you, the safest place to be is up here in the booth.
Yeah, he was right.
And what was it like to
Chambliss said afterwards that he really feared for his life, because I don't know if anyone's seen video of it, but if you haven't, you should look it up, because back in those days there was no police security. Fans just stormed the field. The Yankees hadn't been to a postseason in many years, and the fans were just really hungry for that, and ran out onto the field, and Chambliss couldn't even round the bases because they were mobbing him. So he made a mad, very panicked dash to the dugout and into safety. So Rizzuto described it perfectly in retrospect, because he was in the safest place at that time, up in the booth.
Yeah, it was a madhouse, and he, of course, couldn't, as you described, he could not round third base. He couldn't make it to third, forget going home, and he ran a beeline right to the dugout, and that crowd was going berserk, and yeah, just frightening, really, I would think, also for the players to see all these fans. If you stood in the middle of the field right then and let them come to you, you'd be trampled. I mean, I don't know what happened to you. It'd be a stampede or something, right?
Yeah, totally. If you see the clip of what happened, you'll see just a panic in his face, because he knew if he tried to round the bases, he might not make it out of there alive. It was insane.
So is it better or worse that the police are there now all the time, keeping order when you win the series?
Listen, take a look at that clip. I think it's better.
I agree.
You don't want your players, being murdered on the field.
Although I'm wondering also, you see them get the new thing, or the latest thing is, you see them go to the mound, and there's this big scrum, and they're jumping on each other, and there's this one famous one with the Yankees, I forget who it was, who just jumped on top of this pile of people and fell off of it and all this. But who's at the bottom of that big scrum of people? I mean, how do you survive that?
I'm claustrophobic. That would be my worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Not being able to get out of that.
Or all the weight of all the people on you. There's got to be, anyway, we're going off on this, but it's a little piece of Phil Rizzuto, a little something close to our heart, as he's a New Yorker. Write to us. Let us know who is the announcer you'd like us to focus on next show. We may take a little break in between these shows and do some other shows and come back and revisit this on Everything Old is New Again. Find us everythingoldisnewagain.biz. That's everythingoldisnewagain.biz. Write to us. Let us know who is your favorite announcer on baseball. We'll be back right after this. Everything Old is New Again.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Vaughn into the windup in his first offering. Just a bit outside. He tried the corner and missed.
There we are. We're back here on Everything Old is New Again with David Cohen and Douglas Viviani. That was a little piece of Bob Uecker, but they're not the real Bob Uecker, so to speak. That was from Major League 1989. Do you remember that movie, David Cohen?
Yes, I do. I remember that line. It was a very famous line.
Yeah, it was funny. And I'm trying to think if that was what started his career in acting. Or was it the culmination? Because I know he had a TV show also, Mr. Belvedere. Do you remember that?
That's a good question. I don't know what came first, actually. I remember him as the baseball announcer, and then doing
I'm pretty
commercials.
sure that started his career. Then he did commercials, became real popular, and appeared on Carson and whatever. And then they wrote him this sitcom, Mr. Belvedere.
Okay.
And he's still announcing, from what I understand, to this day.
Really?
So I think it's pretty interesting. The Milwaukee Brewers. Let's just hear like a serious Bob Uecker, because we were celebrating announcers this and last week, and I just want to, for baseball, and I want to just hear a little piece of what he really sounds like, not some Hollywood version,
Here it is. Swing and a drive to center and deep. Way back. Get up. Get up. Get out of here. It's gone for Ryan Braun. He just hit a 3-run shot out of here. And the Brewers have the lead.
There you go. Imagine announcing for the Brewers.
Well, there you go. That's the definition of a homer, right? Who's actually rooting for the ball to leave the park.
Exactly.
But it's endearing. I mean, it's like what you were saying before about rooting for your team, but having a voice that connects you to the team, that's like part of the family. So if you're a Brewers fan, that's what you wanted to hear. You wanted to hear someone rooting for them like you're rooting for them.
Right. It's like having a guy, sitting next to you in the stands that you're kind of a buddy with, and hearing their thoughts, if you will, about the game. And that's the tricky part about announcing, because, we talked about Kubek and Garagiola and how they tried, on the Saturday afternoon with, some decor. So, they tried to keep it middle of the road. And that's, believe it or not, what was special, as you said, about them, because you didn't have the homer part of it. You wanted to hear what does the rest of America think of Thurman Munson? Do they know how good he is and so forth, Right. You just, or is he being ignored? It was sort of that kind of thing.
And now you can't do that anymore. Like even on local broadcasts, I don't think the network or the baseball team really allows these outward, obvious displays of rooting or favoring a team. I remember, this is a different sport, but the New York Rangers hockey team had a color announcer who was a former referee, very beloved in the Ranger community. And when you were listening to the radio, one of their defensemen, Barry Beck, had a great shot from the point, and the Rangers were tied, and Beck had the puck at the blue line. And the announcer, Bill Chadwick, kept yelling, "Shoot the puck, Barry! Shoot the puck, Barry!" and guess what? He was fired.
For that?
Even though every Ranger fan, that's exactly what was going on in the minds of every fan. Like, come on, Barry, shoot the puck. Because he was so outwardly rooting for the Rangers, they fired him. He wasn't back.
Wow.
Which is kind of sad, but...
When did that happen?
It was like... And that was a while ago. That was back in the 80s. So
wow,
it's been a while since I think you get that sort of homerism, at least in the New York market.
And that's a shame because, well, here's the thing. It goes one step beyond. I have a different thought, and then we'll get back to that. Is when I hear the talk radio shows and people call in and they call their team us and we. For some reason, I don't know why, that irks me. It rubs you the wrong way. You have nothing to do with the team.
On the team. What do you mean us?
Yeah.
I didn't see you out there. What number are you?
Right, exactly. Even if you have season tickets, maybe if you have season tickets, you're spending $4,000 a year for a seat or something like that. Maybe you have some right to say that. I don't like it at all. But that's a different perspective. That's the fan, right? The announcer. At least one in the booth, maybe. Maybe you don't want all of them in the booth to do this, but you want one to be your guy or your gal, because there are women doing this now too, which is fine. You want them to be the person that, and I shouldn't say fine, it's actually good. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean to minimize the women in the booth, but I'm just trying to say the idea is, if they have personality and you have a commonality with them, you want to hear them, and you want to hear them and root for your team, or at least, let's put it this way. I have later on, maybe I played it already. I have it for the next show. Juxtaposition of two calls of the same exact call from the two different announcers, the national announcer and the announcer for the team.
Oh, really?
And you can hear it. So we talk about this the next show. You can hear this, and it's much more exciting when you've got your announcer going berserk. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, and I agree. It's one thing to hear the excitement in the voice. I'm all for that. But the actual coming out and rooting for the team and, come on, get out. That's a bit much. But on the other side, have you also noticed that criticizing the home team is also a big no-no? At least there's a line you can cross, I should put it that way, where you could go too far in criticizing your own team. I know Keith Hernandez, who does the color for the Mets, Michael Kay, who does play-by-play and has his own radio show for the Yankees, I think in the past have crossed that line where they're too critical and they've been reprimanded. So, it's like this somewhere there. I think we're all trying to navigate this path where you're doing the play-by-play, you're explaining the facts, but you're just not swaying too much one way or the other. And I think for the most part, it's been working pretty well.
Yeah, I have no problem. I just want some personality. Personality doesn't necessarily mean you're rooting for your team. I totally get that. Because I remember growing up listening to Mets a lot, listening to the Yankees a lot. Yankees had that with Rizzuto. The Mets, the team that I announced, I mentioned before, Lindsey Kiner, Lindsey Nelson, and Bob Murphy, never rooted for the team. They tried to be pretty. You knew that they liked the team. You knew they got more excited when the Mets hit a home run or whatever, no doubt. But they never cheered them on. Let's put it that way. And I remember,
that's a good point because you can hear it in your voice, and I think that's what you really want as a fan, right? Just to hear the excitement.
Exactly, and they're bleeding with the team and they're celebrating with the team, but they're not in your face with it. Rizzuto was different though because Rizzuto was a personality and he was a prior player for that team, and he developed this following because of it. So I guess it's a very unique thing that you need to have a unique personality that's able to do it. Let's just hear before we end this a little bit of Ernie Harwell saying goodbye, and I think this kind of sums up, to me, everything that we're talking about.
And rather than goodbye, please allow me to say thank you. Thank you for letting me be part of your family. Thank you for taking me with you to that cottage up north, to the beach, the picnic, your workplace, and your backyard. Thank you for sneaking your transistor under the pillow as you grew up loving the Tigers. Now, I might have been a small part of your life, but you've been a very large part of mine, and it's my privilege and honor to share with you the greatest game of all.
I don't know what to say. Wow. You tell me.
That's really that was perfect, right?
Yeah, that's what they're feeling, and I think that's what we're feeling when it's done right. And when you hit that announcer that you have a commonality with, but also that respects you, respects the game, and is humble, and has, of course, that guy had tremendous talent. He almost, if you listen, I'm going berserk with all these games. If you listen to him in the 60s and 70s announcing a game, you almost can become a Detroit Tiger fan just from listening the way he is presenting this team, like they're all, heroes and Cinderellas and whatever. It's amazing the way you just become enamored with it. And I guess that's what we're searching for today, or you're always searching for as an owner of a team, is an Ernie Harwell that's going to enamor himself to your fans humbly and present a tremendous word picture, but also a commonality. You just, how you click with some people. You just need somebody that can click with you as a fan, and that's really, I think, hard to do. You tell me.
It is. It's very hard to do. You can't. It's not something that you can teach either. You either have it or you don't have it.
Right, and it's very rare to have it. So let me ask you this. If you're listening and because I'm trying to expand it to the whole country and get, different voices on the show with respect to these baseball announcers, but it's difficult because I'm limited in time, limited in knowledge of, who the Minnesota Twins, announcers were, let's say in the 60s, that kind of thing, I'm doing the best I can, but I'd really like to hear more from you, the California, Texas, wherever. I want to hear Chicago, Illinois, who they root for, and in Iowa and everywhere we're at. I want to know and hear who are your favorites either now or in the past that you'd like us to focus upon. And if I have a couple of names of provincial or local people that I'm not aware of, I can look them up. We could feature them and learn some things from them and celebrate them. So I don't want to leave you out, but I just don't have all of that at my fingertips. So if you can do that, feel free to go to everythingoldisnewagain.biz, and there's a section there to write to us, or just go to oldnewagain@AOL.com. oldnewagain@AOL.com. We'll be back next week with a different topic. We're going to take a little time off of baseball, waiting for you to respond to what I just said, and then we'll be back on Everything Old is New Again next week, talking all things pop culture. All right, David Coe, good to talk to you. Enjoy the day.
Yes, thank you.
These days, the news is full of teen suicide, drug, and alcohol abuse. It's depressing and concerning, but there is hope. Former WWE Intercontinental Champion Mark Merrow.
Champion Choice is a live presentation that empowers students to make positive choices and live their best lives. Teach students how to live a drug-free life, prevent bullying, avoid peer pressure, and keep negative people out of their life. We are defined by our choices. There is hope.
To schedule a Champion Choices presentation for your school or organization, visit thinkpos.org. You've been listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's pop culture entertainment talk show. Find us on the web at everythingoldisnewagain.biz. That's .biz.
See you next week. Same bat time, same bat station.